Welcome back to another episode of The Power of Your Story, a space for people to share their story, learn from their story, and ultimately empower others through that story. Before we get into today's episode and this conversation that I've been wanting to have with a friend of mine, Jennifer, I wanted to make a few quick announcements. And the first one being an invitation to all the people that are tuning in right now to an event that we'll be hosting through another organization called Overcoming Odds. And that event is called Survive to Thrive Attitude of Gratitude. This is something that you'll be able to find more information on the Overcoming Odds site. The reason why I mention that is because all of the people that are putting that particular event together are all the guests from the previous episodes. Scott Mason, Casey Berman, who are also involved within much of the work that we do. So this is something that's of interest to you when it comes to better understanding how do you develop resilience through gratitude, how do you grieve with gratitude, and ultimately what does the whole mindset of gratitude look like beyond the words of being thankful to someone else for the contribution that they've made to your life. The second announcement that I want to make is this. If you have enjoyed any of the previous episodes, if you would consider leaving us a review on Facebook or LinkedIn, that would be extremely helpful in helping these messages spread even more and ultimately do create this space where people can learn from each and every single one of their experiences. The guest and the topic that I wanted to have on this particular podcast today, her name is Jennifer Beitz, if I pronounced that correctly, and if I didn't, I apologize in advance. The topic that I wanted to explore revolves around this concept of empathy, and in particular, empathy, as it is seen, in my opinion, oftentimes as a sign of weakness and not necessarily a sign of strength. And really also just hint or explore the difference between empathy and sympathy and how can you utilize more of it throughout your daily lives. And with that said, what I would like to do is bring Jennifer back up to the show. There she is, Jennifer.
Hey, Oleg, how are you?
I'm well. I'm always grateful to connect with you and have these conversations because there are a couple of things that I think stand out to me from my encounters with you is I think your transparency, your honesty, and if there are situations where you don't know something, you're not afraid to say so. So I think this concept, when it comes to empathy and exploring it and better understanding it as quote unquote sign of weakness, sign of strength, I couldn't think of a better person to have a conversation like this. And you do much of this work,
Yes. Oh, that's so exciting, Oleg. Thank you for that feedback. And thank you for inviting me to be a guest on your podcast today. Super excited to share a conversation with you today.
No, thank you. Thank you for being a part of it. And for those that are listening, I have had some Wi-Fi or internet problems prior to starting this episode. So if one of either myself or Jennifer here drops out during the middle of the conversation, don't worry. We will find a way to come back and pick up from where we left off. But I figured that the best way that maybe we can even start this, and this is more just a question from my own curiosity, and that is, what is the difference between empathy and sympathy?
That's such a great question, too. They really complement each other, yet they're different. And so, Oleg, for me, my understanding of empathy is my ability to put myself in someone else's shoes and to really get curious about what they're feeling and what they're thinking. And so I have a better understanding of their perspective. Whereas sympathy, to me, I find that sympathy is really an ability to show another that you care, So, for an example, when we look at the grieving process, I can show another human through sympathy that I care for them while they're going through a difficult time. But it's not necessary for me in that situation to overthink about what they might be thinking and feeling, and to try to really get into their emotions and how they're feeling. That's not necessary at that moment. And so, although empathy can really drive us to connect with others and really drive that authentic connection, sympathy is our ability to support another while they're going through a challenging situation.
Okay. So
Does
the
that
way
make
that
sense?
I think so. So the way that I understand it is, one is just the ability to relate, and then the other
Mhm.
one allows you to go deeper into the feelings and the thoughts and everything that that person is experiencing. Correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense. And actually, before we go any further, Linda, a mutual connection of ours, has joined us here. And this
Awesome.
is one of the remarks that she had mentioned, is that you are so brave and authentic.
Ah,
And the other comment she made was, we always find a way to come back. Come back. And I think what Linda means here is like come back and to give from our own personal experiences and different things that we've been through. I'm curious to
mhm,
hear, as it relates to this topic and this theme of empathy, in
mhm,
particular, viewing empathy as quote unquote strength or a weakness.
mhm.
Based on your own personal experiences that you've had within your own life, why do you think it is sometimes seen as a weakness?
Ooh, that's such a good question, Oleg. You know, for me, I have a lot of conversations with women. And when we get on the topic of our skill set and certainly certain skills that we bring to the workforce, I am often talking about empathy and how I love to bring that to my leadership. And a lot of women I speak with are immediately have this reaction when I talk about bringing empathy into the workplace. And that reaction is, oh, no, no, that'll be seen as a weakness, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I agree with you, Jen. It's just at the workplace, many leaders are not empathetic. They're not tuned in to their team or their clients. And there is that lack of empathy, and they're not connecting with their team members or connecting with their clients. And when we're able to develop those authentic relationships, it builds that trust. And what better way to do business than to develop relationships with the people who work with us and
Mm-hmm.
with our clients and the various stakeholders? And so I'm always curious when women are quick to comment how empathy is seen as a weakness. It just makes me curious. Are where's that coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Are those old stories that we've been listening to? Might that be coming from the conditioning that we've experienced prior? And so I love to have conversations where we unpack these old stories and these old beliefs around empathy, because I see it as a strength.
What does empathy look like to you now?
To me, empathy as a leader is the ability to connect with the person sitting in front of you that could very well be having an emotional reaction. Empathy is our ability to put ourselves in that other person's shoes without judgment. For an example, when an employee comes to us and they might be experiencing an emotional reaction. We can't always see what's going on for our team members or even for our clients. So when they show up and they're having an emotional reaction, leaning into empathy and really opening ourselves up to a different perspective is a great way for us to build that connection with that other person. And when another person feels that connection, they feel seen, they feel heard, and they feel valued. That's when that connection can go to a deeper level. In essence, you're really creating that safety that so many of us long for.
Mm-hmm. And I think to a degree, it's probably a key ingredient to trust is being able to create that space and that bridge
Right.
between wherever they're at and whatever it is that they've had throughout their lives. And I know that this is something that you and I have been able to do, as well as so many of the other people that join on the Saturday calls, and even outside of that, is having that level of empathy towards each other, so that the trust becomes so strong that I've also realized something, that I think trust is a huge component to breaking through judgments,
Yes.
and really accepting the individual for who they are. So I can definitely relate. I can definitely see how empathy can play such a critical role in developing trust, not only with self, but also with someone else.
Right. And I have a few stories that come to mind when I look at situations in the workplace that I've been in where I've experienced a non-empathetic leader versus an empathetic leader. Right. And let's just look at myself. Let's just look at my story. There was a point in my life where I had a big life event. I chose to walk away from a 20-year marriage. Now, at that time, I was working in a corporate job. And as you can imagine, that is a huge life event going on at home. And so when I come to work, I have to get into a really different headspace to be available to my team and to clients. And it's not easy. I know I'm not the only person that has gone through a big life event and finds it difficult to manage your emotions. Now, when I've been in front of I'm losing my wording here. I'm thinking about a non-empathetic leader.
Mm-hmm.
If I go to a non-empathetic leader and let them know, first of all, the odds of me going to someone who's not empathetic in a leadership position are slim. And the reason they're slim is because they're not developing that relationship with me, with others on their team. Therefore, when it comes time to having a difficult conversation or being open and transparent, I don't feel that the leader is empathetic towards me. There's a good chance I might try and hide what I'm going through. And when I try to hide, mask what I'm going through, I'm going to show up not authentically. In fact, I'm going to get into those people-pleasing behaviors from the past. I'm going to get into the judging from the past. Versus when I've worked for empathetic leaders that go out of their way to establish that connection. And not just with me, but within the whole organization. And they come to work and they're transparent and they're vulnerable. And that creates that safety so that for me, going back to my example of a life event and how I'm feeling, when I'm in front of an empathetic leader, I feel more enthusiasm to go and be transparent and vulnerable myself with them because I've built that connection with them. I know they care. I know they understand. And there's a good chance that when I go to them and let them know what's going on for me, because I feel safe enough to do so, that they're going to respond in a way that allows me to feel cared for and that I matter. And that right there will allow me as an employee, as a team member, to go home and feel that it's okay for me to not be at the top of my game right now. It's okay for me to have a difficult discussion with my organization, with the leader at that time, to let them know what I'm going through. Because when I do that, I can show up better despite going through a major life event.
I think that's such a key space to be able to be in and to be in a way, quote unquote, when it comes to all of that, and just really bringing your whole person to it. And I also find it funny how, I don't know if you've ever experienced this or anyone that's listening right now, how certain things do kind of come full circle and really play full circle. Like even right now, we're having this conversation about empathy and experiencing these, internet outages and things like that. Like that in a way, it's about showing empathy. If there's anything that I'm learning right now, it's this theme and this topic. It's more present right now than probably ever before.
Right. Right. Look at COVID. What did COVID do? Right. It really upset the apple cart, and the old leadership style of command and demand. Well, that was really hard to do when everyone was working remotely. And not to mention, if you don't have those connections with your team members, and now they're not right front and center in front of you, you also, well, it's that trust. And if there's that lack of empathy and that lack of trust, when a situation like COVID hits and it causes all workers to go remote, as a leader, you're going to feel out of control. You're not going to be able to see what your coworkers, what your peers are doing. And that's that old style of leadership where they kind of wanted to see you in your chair and felt that the only way that you could be productive is if you were in that chair. I think COVID blew that right out of the water. I love that.
Yeah, the fact that you have the ability to do many of the things that you want from the comfort of your own home or whatever that looks like, I think it probably is going to redefine a workplace environment moving forward.
Right.
And really put a different perspective to what does productivity look like.
Right. And I really feel that leaders had to show up differently. Now all of a sudden, the people they manage were showing up imperfectly. And by that, I mean hopping on a Zoom call, and now all of a sudden, something that was kind of taboo, right? Like women don't necessarily showcase their children when they're at work. Or worse yet, we don't really let people into our homes when we go to work. Well, that all changed when COVID hit. Now, all of a sudden, we have both males and females working from home, and their children are also at home, many times e-learning, and often right beside the adults. Right. So that really changed the landscape. And, that old leadership style, that lack mentality, that, I just need my staff to be busy all the time and not really connect with them. I think that we're seeing the demise of that, and we're seeing the rise of the empathetic leader that is able to lead from the heart and be open and transparent. it's really a beautiful cycle of give and take.
Mm-hmm. Who is an empathetic leader within your life?
Now, I haven't had the opportunity to work with some of the leaders that I find would be empathetic leaders. However, I have had a few leaders in the workplace that have really modeled that empathetic leadership for me. And I definitely know when I'm around an empathetic leader. And I know that because my superpower is my sensitivity. I can really walk into environments and really pick up on the thoughts and feelings of others before they're even aware of their thoughts and feelings. One story I love to share of an empathetic leader is I was working for an organization and I had not seen this up until then, where every day the leader came into the organization and personally walked around to each person's desk and acknowledged them every single morning.
Wow.
That really created a ripple effect in the organization. With that leader modeling that behavior, it really ignited inspiration in others. It really ignited that feeling of camaraderie, of that team building experience. And in fact, whenever that leader would ask others in the organization to do things, it was often met with yes and not that resistance. A lot of that he built that yes, a lot of that he built every day he came in, and that simple act of acknowledging the people that work in your organization and for your team. Wow, that simple act can really unlock a lot of potential on your team.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer, I know that you do a lot of work like this with different groups, and in particular, a specific focus on women. Tell us a little bit more about what do you have coming up, and for those that are tuning in right now, what can they be a part of when it comes to your work and your mission in life right now?
Well, one way that I love to get my story out is through the book I wrote on my personal story of transformation, as well as through the various conversations I've had with women. Through those conversations, I found they too were experiencing a lot of what I was experiencing. And so I also offer coaching to other females, specifically who are working in IT, as I found my experience from working in male-dominated fields is that quite often women show up in those situations and tend to play small and tend to shrink to fit in. I know that for 3 years I was working in that field, and that's part of my story. Is I had a personal event take place at work, and I took what that person said to heart, and I took action only to find out that that was people pleasing. I really didn't want to do that. And it's through my story that I want to have more conversations with women and empower them to really do that inner work so that they too can discover who they are, what they want, and really who they want to be, so that they can show up in these situations where quite often they're the minority. Currently, a lot of leadership positions are predominantly held by white males. And I would love nothing more than to see the rise of females into those leadership positions. And for the very reason we're speaking about today, Oleg, which is naturally women are empathetic listeners. And I feel that that would really complement leadership. I would love to see both energies at the leadership table, the masculine energy and the feminine energy.
I love that. I love that for many reasons. I think the fact that you and I have had the chance to connect over the past year to maybe even 2 years. I don't know
Right?
how long it's been.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Exactly. But having the opportunity to connect around those topics and learn more about your work, and also just learn more about who you are as a person and what drives you, it's been inspiring to see that. So for anyone that's listening right now, I encourage you to connect with Jennifer at her website. Is that the best place? LinkedIn?
Yes, right. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on my website. And Oleg has generously put that on his banner. I'd love to chat. Yes, that's where you can
That's
find
awesome.
me.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being a guest. Thank you for being in my life. And thank you for having the impact that you do.
I appreciate you, Oleg. Thanks so much for inviting me to be a guest on your show today.
Mm-hmm.